where the South Alabama Jaguars live up to the high expectations. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. And finally, we have the head coach of the South Alabama Jaguars, Kane Wommack, to hop on and talk Jaguars football. Coming off a fantastic season, winning 10 ball games, going to a bowl game for the first time in forever. Although the bowl game didn't go quite their way, we jump into that immediately. And get past that and look ahead to spring ball. But they will have expectations. I predict they will be picked to win the Sun Belt. Not only the West, but South Alabama, with something along the lines of 20 starters returning, will be the team to beat in the Sun Belt in 2023. We talk about Carter Bradley. We talk about some of the incoming players and the new coaches. I do appreciate Kane's time, so let's go to it right now. Here's the head coach of the South Alabama Jaguars, Kane Wommack. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. We've been hoping for our next guest for a little bit, and they got spring practice opening up on Friday. He is the head coach of South Alabama Jaguars. He is Kane Wommack. Coach, are we over the bowl game yet?
Great opening question. Appreciate it. Yeah, man, we, that was a hard one that we had to take a long look at ourselves and particularly on defense and some of the things that we didn't accomplish very well. But I will say this, not to look on the bright side of everything, but when you have a 10-win season and you accomplish a lot of things that you were trying to get done, and then you get your ass kicked in a bowl game like that, it gives you an opportunity to be able to reflect and give our guys, some momentum going into the off season in terms of what they got to do better. Particularly on defense, there were some things as a team. We look like a team that had not been to a bowl game in a while, and I think that's exactly what our players took from it is we the same expectation that we had in the season in terms of what we were able to do execution wise. We got to bring that to a bowl game as well.
So the question I really wanted to ask you this whole time since the bowl game is it tougher to get over a game like that, or is it tougher losing in the last seconds? Knowing, coaches hate losing, period, but what's easier to get past if you're a head coach?
I think the answer is yes to all of it.
Right.
They're never fun. I mean, you put so much into these games, and losing is hard. I mean, it should be hard. It ought to hurt. And I told the players in the locker room after the bowl game, I mean, look, we want to celebrate the accomplishments that we had as a football team and our first ever winning season in program history, and to get 10 wins and an ability to, to go over there and compete and represent the Sun Belt and all those things. But, when you lose a game like that, you want to celebrate seniors and all those things, but it's just hard. It needs to hurt. It should hurt for a little while, and that's exactly what it did. And we're certainly very proud of some of the things that we accomplished. But I think there's a hunger in our program right now, and a lot of that I think has to do with some of the adversities and challenges that we faced this season. Through some of the tough losses that we had in season, and certainly the bowl game was a part of that.
We're talking to Kane Wommack, head coach of the South Alabama Jaguars football team. All right, one of the things that you wanted to get across to your team was expecting to win. I got a feeling this year a lot of other people besides you and your team are going to expect South Alabama to win. You won 5 games in your first game, kind of turned the program around, got banged up a little bit at the end, won 10 games last year. Now it's going to be, how do you take that next step when, for the first time you kind of know who your quarterback is, and you know who your team is, and they know about you? How do you take it to the next level?
Well, I think for us, when we think about our program and what we're trying to get accomplished, I mean, you see some of the biggest thing first and foremost, right, was getting our guys to understand that, hey, they got to compete at a high level, and that we can, when we get in these tough games, that we have an opportunity to do what we need to do in order to finish and win those games, right? And then, for us, we were in some big games against some really good football teams. Troy's a very good football team that had a great season. You look at, obviously Western Kentucky in the bowl game. You look at UCLA coming up short. What we've got to do is, I think we got to let our experience work for us moving forward into this season. And so, you think about having 20 returning starters. We've got 18 guys that returned from a year ago, and then 20 guys, if you include Keith Goldman and Quentin Wilfon, that are both starting players that are coming back for their senior year. I mean, we've got a lot of experience that we need to be able to let work for us moving forward. I'm sorry, I'm on the road here, so I hope
okay.
I didn't jack you up. I'm going to jump back in the car in just a second.
Okay. All right, so then this is interesting because I presume there is a learning curve, in your first and second years when you got a lot of new players coming in and you're a new head coach. I presume there's not going to be a whole lot of tolerance for that learning curve because, that first team is going to be, they know what to expect. They know what the plan is. They know what the team is all about. I presume that there could be a lot of yelling on Friday on day one of spring ball compared to previous years.
Well, I think there's probably some level of balance and equilibrium there, right? Like on one end, there is a high expectation and standard that these players and coaches alike have held themselves to. But at the same time, you got, these guys are experienced. I mean, we don't make a lot of mistakes on day one of practice. You know what I mean? We executed at a pretty high level, and I think a lot of that is one, you've got a lot of experience in terms of our players, but also you got continuity in terms of Major Applewhite and Corey Batoon. Going into year 3 of our offensive and defensive systems, our special teams is going to stay the same in terms of what we're doing as well. So you got a chance to have a very clean year 3, day 1 spring ball.
All right, let's take a time out. When we come back and have Kane Wommack on again. 3, 2, 1. All right, let's take a time out. We'll come back with head coach of the Jaguars, Kane Wommack, and talk about his quarterback, Carter Bradley. But first, let me tell you a little bit about FanDuel. It's the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, it is Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Let's get back to it with head coach of the South Alabama Jaguars, Kane Wommack, talking about his quarterback, Carter Bradley. And let's talk about, those expectations and the experience. What would you like to see your quarterback, Carter Bradley, do to take his game to the next level? What does he need to do to improve?
Yeah, I mean, I think you think about where Carter was a year ago versus where he is right now. I mean, there's a significant difference, right, in terms of him trying to learn our system and earn a starting job versus he is our starting quarterback, right? And he does have experience going through an entire season, right, and operating and executing our offense at a high level. So the exciting thing for us, right, is to build upon that momentum and the leadership. Carter spends more time with Major than anybody else on our offense that steps out on that field. And so he understands what the coordinator's trying to get done. Carter grew up in this profession, with his dad as a defensive coordinator in the NFL and a head coach in the NFL. So for him to go into year 2 with that expectation and understanding of the standard, and to hold other players on the field accountable to that standard, I think is really exciting for our team.
So this would be my own analysis, what I see on the field. When things don't go well for Carter tends to throw the ball harder. He throws the ball hard as it is, like against Georgia Southern, right? Like pick 6 on the first play. Then the throws got harder, right? Struggled against Troy to begin with. He was banged up in that game, but struggled to begin with before he led the comeback. How do we get him to, shake it off if that play isn't working and just come to the next play later on.
I mean, I know where you're getting at, but I think, I think some of it's just year one, right?
Sure.
He's, I think some of it he's trying to figure out, where he can and where he can't take risks. And when you get in tight games, you want to be the guy that makes that play, right? And so for him, I think him at sometimes trying to force a play when he didn't necessarily need to, because he felt the urgency that, right, we needed to make something happen. When you lose a tough ball game against Troy, I mean, the game was 10-6, right? One play can be the difference in the outcome of the game. And our quarterback knows that just as well as anybody else on the field.
Sure.
So, I think him understanding that if we get more players around him that operate and execute at a high level, that if he will just do his job to the utmost consistency and let our experience work for us going into year 3 and year 2 for him, I think that's a recipe for success.
All right, we're talking with Kane Wommack, South Alabama Jaguars head football coach, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. How do you tweak things heading into year 3? Same quarterback for 2 years in a row and same offensive coordinator for the 3rd year with Major Applewhite.
Yeah, I mean, I think specifically, I could say this generally for our team. We need to let our experience work for us, but we need to, our kind of the emphasis that we've put in the offseason are 2 things. One, we need to crank the dial forward, right? What we did in 2022 will no longer be good enough in the 23 season. We've got a more difficult schedule. On top of that, every team that we play is going to put a circle around our game because you won 10 games and you operated at a high level a year ago. It is a different dynamic than what we were heading into the 22 season. And so crank the dial forward in terms of your urgency, your understanding, the level of production and the playmakers that have to step up to make plays. And then the second thing is we got to be able to win our one-on-one matchups, whether it be creating more negative plays and from a defensive perspective and pass rush and or whether it be winning one-on-one matchups and offensively, whether it be pass rush or a wide receiver versus a defensive back. We've got to do a better job of owning our role to a high level and operating at a point to where we can produce at a higher level at each individual position throughout this offseason.
All right, so a couple of guys you do have to replace, and we will get to that schedule portion of the show here in a minute. But a couple of guys you have to replace, one on offense, Jalen Wayne, one on defense, Darrell Luter Jr. Both had successful Senior Bowl weeks. We're looking forward to them getting drafted. Who is first up trying to replace those guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you lose guys like Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Wayne, right, on one end, it gives opportunity for younger players, right, to have a chance to step up, right, where maybe they were in the shadow of somebody else. Fortunately, right, you have 2 really great experienced players that both had over 60 catches in Colin Lacey and Devin Voisin this offseason at the wide receiver position. But then you have a group of guys, right, that are young players that are going into their redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore years. J. Jawan Townsend, Jeremiah Webb, you've got Jamal Pritchett, you've got a number of these players, right, that have just been waiting on their time and their opportunity, and they've played in limited roles because you had guys like Jalen Tolbert and Jalen Wayne in front of them. Now all of a sudden, you add an experienced starter and Javon Ivory coming from Memphis, who had 98 catches in his career there and was a 3-year starter at Memphis. You got Shamar Sangren, who was a UT Chattanooga bounce back wide receiver that is coming by way of Itawamba Community College. And so, you look at some of those players and you think it's really a pretty exciting room right now. We've got a lot of talent with a lot of, returning experience in terms of they've been around our program for the last couple of years, but haven't had that opportunity on the field. And so I think that's something that from an offensive perspective, you look at replacing Jalen Wayne, that's a good deal. I'll tell you the thing from a defensive perspective with Darrell Luter that I'm excited about, is you look at hiring a guy like Jay Hobson as our corners coach, who has been an experienced defensive coordinator, an experienced head coach. the level of understanding that he is providing for these young corners, right, that are going to obviously elevate their role within our program in a short amount of time is something that we're already starting to see some of the benefits of having an experienced defensive coordinator mind leading that room.
I'm looking forward to the Craig Stevenson feature on Jay Hobson because he had the job at Southern Miss, lost to South Alabama, and then left the job. And so I'm looking for, and now he's coaching for South Alabama. So I'm looking forward to that Craig Stevenson feature in AL.com. Just letting you know that's coming
Sure.
up. All right, let's take one more time out, and we'll come back with Kane Wommack, head coach of the Jaguars, talking about the expectations, and this schedule does line up, as we did an episode a couple of weeks ago about the New Year's 6-Day Bowl. We don't talk to him about that, but we do say, you guys, that South Alabama has a chance to do something special if they take care of a business, and they have the potential to do that. I do also want to say thank you. Again, the podcast is growing by leaps and bounds. I mentioned it the other day that we have more than doubled our subscriptions in the last 4 weeks. So really appreciate it. More spring football news to come around. We'll obviously do more than just South Alabama. That just happens to be where I live at the time being. And so we'll do more spring football. Georgia State is already done. South Alabama hasn't even started. That's crazy. It just doesn't make sense to me. We'll get more into baseball. Conference play is underway, and we will maybe even a little softball, but more Sun Belt. This is the best place you can get it. And so please tell your friends about it. If you see it on Facebook and or Twitter, like it, share it, and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. It is very much appreciated. All right, let's wrap things up with Kane Wommack, the head coach of South Alabama. He talks about the schedule and knows that it is there for the taking. We're talking to Kane Wommack, South Alabama Jaguars head football coach. All right, I did this a couple of weeks ago when the schedule comes out. I know coaches take it one game at a time, but you have a schedule that lines up that, you know, if you take care of business, Tulane on the road, whether they'll be ranked or not, they'll be a top 30 football team. You're going to go play Oklahoma State. They seem to be a little bit in flux with the transfer portal. Do you guys, I know you're concentrating on Tulane now, but do you ever take a moment to say, guys, if we do what we're supposed to do each and every game, we could have that kind of special season that you've been looking for since you arrived in Mobile?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what the offseason is for, right? You don't, in the offseason, you don't just look at one game. You look at, you know, what are the things within our conference, right, that we did well and what we've got to improve on in order to, to execute at a more consistent and higher level than what we did a year ago. And then, you know, obviously the same deal for your non-conference opponents. You got to be able to look at the schedule in its entirety and try to address the things at hand that are going to maximize your opportunities and within the season, not just one game at a time, but collectively. And so, you know, when I think about that, you know, obviously the first game in 2 lanes, really exciting to be able to go play there and what they were able to accomplish a year ago and what we've been able to accomplish. You know, you look at Oklahoma State, you know, there's certainly a team there that the transfer portal has affected both ways, right? They've lost some players, they've gained some players, and so who knows what we'll see the third game of the season. What I'm excited about, right, is the continuity, both of our players and coaches that we've been able to retain, and some of the people that we've been able to bring in, both with some of these young talented players that we've got that will contribute to our team, and certainly. Some of these coaches that we've been able to bring in here that we feel like it can elevate the level of understanding for their positions respectively.
All right, a couple more questions for head coach Kane Wommack, South Alabama Jaguars, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. Tell us about the new coaches and how do you assimilate them into your program?
Yeah, I mean, so, you know, certainly we've had 2 on-field coaches, right, that we've brought into the program, and Jay Hobson, who I've known for a very long time, and is an experienced defensive mind, and somebody that for our young corners, I mean, obviously is going to provide a lot of knowledge and wisdom and experience, and coaches at a really high level, and has always, you know, brought a ton of energy and excitement into any locker room that he's coached. And then you've got a new special teams coordinator and defensive assistant in Trey Williams that we just brought into the program. In fact, his first day was yesterday. Going into our first week of spring practice, our special teams in terms of our scheme are not going to change. But Mobilians know all about Trey, who was a very accomplished high school player at St. Paul's High School, and then went on to have a great career as a team captain at Auburn, and so very excited to be able to bring him back to Mobile, and some of the people that I value their opinions. I played for Gus Malzahn. Trey Williams played for Gus Malzahn, and Gus, speaks very highly of him and all the things that he accomplished as a player, but more so what he's going to accomplish in his coaching career as well.
All right, to wrap it up here with Kane Wommack, one of the things you said you wanted on the defensive side of the ball was to get guys to be able to rush the quarterback a little bit more. Were you able to do that heading into the spring season?
Well, I mean, I think that's yet to be determined, right? But certainly, we've put an emphasis on the amount of negative plays and sacks that we want to create. This defense has been around for a very long time under my dad and Dave Wommack, who had great defenses in a very long career. And in fact, early in his career at Southern Miss, Jay was one of the coaches that took over after my dad left, and then became the defensive coordinator there. And we've always been able to create havoc in the backfield and negative plays, and we executed at a very high level this past year. I think going into the bowl game, we were about top 15 in every defensive category, with the exception of sacks and takeaways. And so that's something that we need to have a little bit more emphasis in. I think when you have players like Jamie Sheriff, you've got Quentin Wilfon, Charles Coleman, Bubba Thomas, all those experienced players up front on the defensive line and outside linebacker positions that are coming back, that they can focus on maybe some of those details that it takes outside of stopping the run, which we did a very good job of a year ago to create some more chaos in the backfield.
Here's Kane Wommack, South Alabama Jaguars head football coach, Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We will see you bright and early on St. Patrick's Day for the opening of South Alabama spring ball. Thanks for your time, Coach. Safe travels.
All right. Sounds great. All right, Jay's up, and as always, Leo.